The Garbage Man, Part 3. Reconvening. 1 week later. Another day of rain, another night of rain and puddles. Though Jie has so far been able to enjoy a quiet Saturday alone, the gross presence of a slightly damp letter on his coffee table can still be felt by him. The letter is a formal and non-negotiable invitation to a work party being thrown at an office building nearby to HQ. Non-negotiable in that it'd be both rude and a threat to his employment to not accept after his boss rented out an entire building just for this reason. He's tried to kick his feet up and ignore it up until now, but he's learning the hard way that you can't try to ignore something. He's just made time blitz by much quicker instead. Standing in a room full of people he ought to know the names of by now, Jie feels a pressure in his throat that would concuss him if it becomes too much to handle. He doesn't usually allocate this much free time to anyone but himself, so the sight of 36 half-familiar faces babbling around him doesn't render any reaction besides anxiety. He was approached earlier by two people, a man with brown hair and brown eyes and a woman with red hair and blue eyes. He could have sworn their names both started with an A. He'd have liked to remember more about the people who came up to him and what they said, but in their presence he dissociated and just let his mouth roam. He won't remember anything about those interactions come tomorrow. Jie at least makes the effort to be present and intrigued for his boss, though it's likely because he figures anything to come out of his employer's mouth is important information. Bai is the name he knows his boss by. Jie probably should have remembered her last name, too. Bai is an extraordinarily pale, ghostly-looking older woman. Her skin is so non-melanated that Jie thought she'd covered herself in baby powder when they'd first met some years back. Jie is still unsure whether it's a condition or just a happenstance of birth.
"You didn't have too much trouble getting over here, did ya?"
asks Bai. "Nah, I live nearby," Jie says, actively staring at his house through the large row of windows taking up all the space of the far wall across the room.
"Good. With how frail you are, I thought a storm drain would have swallowed you up for sure."
"What about you? I'm surprised the rain didn't wash away all the coke on your nose." Smirking, Jie leans in closer to Bai's face. "Or is that just your nose?"
"Man, you better count your next check twice. I can still fire, you know."
Jie swats the air in front of him and scoffs. You would have done it by now. I'll be stuck here till the sun explodes." At this point, most if not all lines of superficiality between the two have blurred to the point of non-existence. The pair, ironically enough, had initially bonded over their dislike of corporate small talk and co-worker friends. From the get-go, from the interview room. The first thing she ever said to him was,
"Welcome. I hope you're fully aware of how dangerous this job is. People have died in these trucks before, and you don't look very invulnerable even with the safety platforms they just put on."
Even after meeting Nan, the poor guy still hasn't figured that one out. There's an insatiable churning in Nan's stomach that he has ignored up until now. It was ignored out of a suspicion it might be hunger. He hoped it wasn't so. He thought it couldn't be so. But after a week of this churning, he doesn't know what else it could be. Regretfully, his pockets lined with nothing but moths, Nan decides to visit a food bank. He had been hobbled up on a hillside far away from the inner cities, patiently watching as the distant lights kept shifting position for as long as he could before his stomach overtook his mind. He didn't like the idea of interacting with the public unless absolutely necessary. He'd been banking on Jie finally coming to his senses and connecting with him further. Perhaps Nan was the dense one for thinking a man like Jie would consider such a thing for so long. There isn't much to eat in the pantry. Naturally, the foods meant to be refrigerated and eaten as soon as possible, as well as junk food, are all gone. It's just unfortunate that those items were what was in both highest supply and highest demand. All that's left are non-perishables, canned goods. Nan recognizes a can of corn atop a shelf on the wall, though he doesn't recognize the brand. He hopes that just one can of corn ought to be enough to satisfy a week's worth of hunger. He hails the attention of the woman behind a fold-open table. "Excuse me," he starts. "I don't need much. Maybe just that can of corn right there, and I'll be on my way." The woman looks at him with some confusion.
"That's fine. Do you have a can opener for it? If not, we can provide you with one as well."
Nan probably needs it, but he figures that to be as unobtrusive as possible, he'd rather take his chances smashing it against the ground elsewhere.
"That's all right. I have my own." "All right,"
says the lady, plucking the can off the shelf, holding it out to Nan.
"Here you go, then."
He stretches his arms out for the can. He misses. Both of his hands pass right through it, leaving nothing but two big fistfuls of wet corn kernels while the can itself hits the tile flooring with a loud series of hollow clangs. Nan watches the can wide-eyed as it slowly rolls to the corner of the room. Whoa! Right out of the can. How did you do that? Nán can only chuckle nervously. Thank you very much, he says. He quickly turns around and bolts for the door, during which he takes a big bite of corn.
Oh, gee, there's so much more out there for you than just being a garbage man.
Bai picks up her cocktail again.
As hard a worker as you are, I care about you more as a person than as an employee. Even I have to admit this place feels like a dead end sometimes.
Jie nods in accordance. Maybe. I'm probably just too scared to try anything different. Bai raises an eyebrow.
Too scared?
Yeah, I've been here so long that at this point it might feel like too big a change for me to handle. That I wouldn't know where to start.
I get that.
Bai takes another large sip of the cocktail.
Did I ever tell you why I took last week off?
Jie thinks, but nothing comes up. He shakes his head.
I had to go to my aunt's funeral.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, shut up. None of that. I buried her. I didn't have many thoughts when I got the news during my part of the speech or on the ride back home. We had a lot of great times together. Fond memories. In the moment of them happening, it was almost enough for me to forget that she was unabashedly racist towards Argentinians.
Jie reels his head back a bit.
What? She was unabashedly racist towards Argentinians. She didn't like them.
Bai finishes her drink and sets the empty cup upside down on the table beside her.
But I never fully forgot. I hated that part about her, but I was too scared to say anything about it. I didn't want her to hate me too. The only power I had was to ignore her until she died. I'll tell you, Jie, when she did eventually die, I was so relieved I even volunteered to lower her into the ground myself. It was like she had this invisible power over me. Like something wasn't allowing me to see her in an ill manner just because of the good times we shared when I was young and ignorant. That all washed away in an instant. I was just lucky my problem was solved for me.
It sounds like you two had a pretty turbulent relationship. Bai shrugs.
Turbulent for me, at least. She was just being herself.
All I'm saying, Jie, is sometimes you don't ever understand what was so good about a person or a place. Sometimes it's only in the present. Once you've moved past a certain obstacle, that you start to regret the situation you never realized was pure shit to begin with. Jie lazily shifts an empty red solo cup between his hands, trying to take in the advice given to him. I'll have to think about that. Thanks, he says. Bai only makes a click sound and points her finger at Jie in return.
I'll be right back. Gotta use it,
she says, gesturing towards the bathroom. Jie steps out of her way and nods. Now, with nobody to talk to, Jie idles around the room full of almost nameable faces, weaving between the bodies until he finally reaches the large window on the other side of the room. By the grace of the many lights, he can see the city skyline in all its glory, all its marvelous distance. He looks down at the life below, the strangers crossing the street, the cars whizzing by. He reads the signs hanging above the shops. One smaller green sign catches his eye, reading, Zhangbei Food Pantry. From the bottom of his line of sight, he sees the shop's front doors staying stiffly still and a man running through them. Such a sight naturally grabbing his full attention, he notices he's holding something as little yellow pellets spill out onto the sidewalk until the trail eventually comes to a stop in a nearby alleyway. Jie recognizes his scrappy white shirt and torn blue jeans almost immediately. He looks around, wondering what it is he needs to stay at this party for. He thinks nothing. Nán feels shame for the first time since reanimating, being stuck hiding in a dark, dead-end street eating cold corn by the fistful. Suddenly, with the sound of footfalls breaking from the crowd and approaching his location, his heart sinks to the ground. He can only hope the shadows provide a thick enough veil to keep him and his secrets hidden. Nán? A safely familiar voice calls out. Oh, Jie, it's you! Hi! He instinctively wipes the sweat from his brow. I saw you running like a maniac earlier. What happened? The silence takes hold as Nán catches his breath. If nothing else this experience has taught him, he still retains all his human functions. He can feel pain, hunger, and run out of breath. Everything apart from dying again, it seems. He can even feel the rain as it pours down over his head and soaks his body. He can feel his internal temperature drop and shivers because of it. Nán stutters. I was wrong. Wrong about what? I'm pretty much entirely human again. I need to eat and drink. Or else he'll die again? Nán shakes his head. The hunger pangs and dehydration will just keep getting more and more painful until I'm at a point where death would feel like mercy. Jie recalls the bag of soft-shelled crabs he was keeping in his coat pocket and pulls them out. Here, have some of these. They're soft-shelled crabs. Nán raises an eyebrow and reaches for the bag. Huh, I've never had those before. Jie lets the bag go. The two defeatedly watch it pass through Nán's hands and slap onto the wet pavement. Alright, hold on. Jie starts pulling his arms out of his sleeves. I can at least give you this. Jie decides to take off his coat and give it to him instead. Again, it immediately falls to the ground, soaking up the water pooling in the uneven sidewalk. God damn it, Jie mumbles, quickly picking up his jacket and wringing it as tightly as he can. It's alright, Jie. Thanks for trying to help at least. No, I could... Jie considers the idea of letting Nán stay in his house. Naturally, he still has reservations about it, let alone the unpredictable nature of being a supernatural force. Nán is still mostly a stranger to him. It's one thing to be worried about how little you know about a person you're letting into your house. It's another being worried about how much they might know about you. He considers as well, for all that he does know about Nán and being the only one to know it, that he doesn't have a choice. They ought to be near each other. I could let you stay at my house for a while. Until it gets a little nicer out, you know. Nán's eyes light up brightly for the first time in a week. Yeah, of course. I won't need to stay long. Thank you so much. Jie nods, getting the last drips of water out of his jacket. He pitches it over Nán's head, creating a tent over him to keep him dry on the way back to his house.